She's telling lies about you. She's saying things to get inside my head. Ooh, I'm feeling unaffected. I'm not impressed by all the things she said. Ooh, had a fun, now I'm the one, the only one that's got you, baby. Got you, baby. I'm feeling sorry for her. Tonight I'm lying warm inside your bed. Ooh, I know that we are golden. I know that we are golden. She's telling lies about you. She's saying things to get inside my head. Ooh, I'm feeling unaffected. I'm not impressed by all the things she said. Ooh, had a fun, now I'm the one, the only one that's got you, baby. Got you, baby. I'm feeling sorry for her. Tonight I'm lying warm inside your bed. Ooh, I know that we are golden. I know that we are golden. Yeah, I know that we are golden.
Finds real rebellion is not just rebellion in a group. Real rebellion is a rebellion of thought, and rebellion of thought is an individual thing. And I think what happened more or less is that things got codified, things got segregated, and things have new rules. Sometimes these rules are even more, I would say, more detrimental than the greater rules of society, because China actually as a society is relatively weird about rules. It's but when these cliques become very codified, before become very firm, become their set hierarchies that are very much enforced, then they kill the rebellion within the group and the rebellion of individual thought. They relegate the individual thought to the collective, and the collective, even if it's a small collective, is subjugates the individual.
Knowing all these really hard obstacles, why are you choosing to rebel in your own way with establishing this record label? Obviously, it seems thinking of ways to.
I'm making a living as well, just to let you know.
Sure, of course. But it's obviously in your heart, or at least some of your ethics, you care very deeply about breaking up static institutions, fighting against monopoly, making sure people can have platforms not based entirely on algorithms, trying to help artists make a living. Why not just
not just me. I think there's a lot of people who enter this industry with similar ideas. And then they're pressured into doing things that, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a purist either.
Of course.
It's just fun. Sometimes there's just different groups of people in the world. We're an ant colony, and each of us has a different function, and this is my function. So if I embrace it, then I can live a relatively okay life. Of course, I'm not, the most rebellious ant. I'm more like the middle rebellious ants. I'm more like the person who looks at institutions and realize that they exist for a reason, but also realize that some of the reasons are good and some of the reasons could be recycled, could be redone, could be rebooted. And at one point or another, I will become the status quo and people will have to rebel against me.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way humanity is. So at this point in my life, this is where I am. Maybe 20 years from now, I will be evil.
We can come interview you.
But I will have a bigger studio by then. Oh, wow, there's always.
Where are you at now, both with the tech organization and the label? Where do you, if you were staging them or if you were blueprinting them, where are they both now and where are they going to go?
Well, I mean, I would like eventually Noi to. First off, I'm not the only decision maker on this. So to not give a shout out to the people who made this possible would be a huge disservice to them. So my partner, Philip Grafer, and my partner in life and partner in business, Philip Grafer. Our partner in Noi, Dirk, who, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Dirk. Sorry, Dirk. I didn't want to pronounce your name wrong. And last name. And then there's also our team at Fake, which is consisting of Zhang Jie, who is probably he's the person who keeps the ship still sailing and plugs up all the holes because we keep on shooting holes in the hull. And also Zheng Yu at Pilot, who gave us funding. There's a lot of people who kind of jump on board our little dinky every so often. The thing is, if you have an idea of what you want in China, you can kind of, and if you're willing to make a certain level of personal sacrifice, and if you're willing to draw the line of where your compromise lies, because you will have to compromise in all things in life to make it happen. You will have to do a certain level of compromise. But if you have a very clear line of where your level of compromise is, I think you can do a lot, and I think that's where we're at right now. We're at a place where we hadn't had to compromise as much as probably we need to in order to become a large enough organization to have a bigger impact. But at the same time, we're kind of luxuriating in our level of personal freedom, but we're going to have to pay a price for that at one point. And that will happen naturally. So I think the next step for Noi and for a lot of other things is to decide at what level do we want to draw a new line for that compromise, and also to set a new goal. I think in the beginning we were just pretty happy to have a platform to gain people that we wouldn't normally get a chance to meet. But to talk to incredibly intelligent people and to put them on the stage. I don't have that level of hubris. That was already enough for us. I can massively change things. But what I can second line is to make it somehow is a place at something that has more of a platform to observe 300, 200 people and to adapt to them. And to expand that idea and to include more aspects and ideas.
This is universal. So some of the books where they have to is searching in that way for where there's a point of no return, where you can either say, okay, this isn't going to work, or I'm just going to, but also to maybe I'll just keep doing this even if it means I end up broke as destitute. Or even to be really bold and say, well, let's try to do something.
That's a choice anybody can make. You can also do crack until you're broken destitute. I'm not saying that music and crack are the same things. Everybody's looking for a new revenue model. But yet nobody is really looking. I'm a musician, and I've been very lucky. I think for us, because I made certain choices in my life that put me in a better place. I don't know if you've read probably everything by Malcolm Gladwell. So kind of, but I chose to move from Los Angeles to China, where there was a smaller market and I had a better position in it. I chose to start off in media, which means that when I did a band, I had a lot more promotion than everyone else because I already were friends with the media outlets because they were my colleagues in the past. But I didn't do any of that necessarily on purpose. Quite a lot of it was luck, circumstance, and frankly need. Maybe I just didn't have enough money to continue to live in LA. And I think sometimes in life, to say you love something, especially when you say you love music, is a bit abstract. Like, what do you love about music? You love the act of creativity. Okay, understood. You love being on stage and communicating with the audience. That makes you feel great. It gives you a rush. This is where you want to be. Great. You love the fact that you write something, a track, and then you give it to somebody and that person listens to it and it changes their life. Okay, you feel amazing about that. That's also a part of your ego fulfillment, and also maybe you feel more part of society. Understood. What specifically do you love? So if you are going into a situation where you're broke and you're miserable and nobody listens to your shit and you're constantly complaining about how everyone is like, shitty and this world doesn't get you and everything else, then you are not in love. Just saying, this is like a toxic relationship and you need to kind of go back, take a step back and look if you are in love with music, if music loves you back, or if everything that surrounds music loves you back. And most importantly, what you want to give to that. Like sometimes, your kind of angry grandmother with like the bad breath and who hates on everything gets sick, and you're still sitting there nursing her until the day she dies. And you get nothing back from that so far as physically, or maybe even she yells at you every 5 minutes, so not even emotionally. But you love her, so you have to do this. Now, if music is your sick grandmother, then go ahead and do that if that's what happens. But most of the time, people are afraid that I've given so much of my life to something, just like I've given so much of my life to someone, like leaving a toxic relationship. And they're afraid to change. They're afraid to adapt. They're afraid to find new outlets for their creativity that maybe makes more sense for them physically and emotionally. And I cannot condone that level of commitment unless, of course, I understand why that person is committed. If that person is committed to something because they're a sick grandmother and that's what they feel about their music, okay, I understand. But if they're only committed because they're afraid that they've wasted their life doing something that they were never fit to do, or that the world wasn't about to accept, but in reality they didn't know what they loved about that thing in the first place, that's a toxic relationship. You need to get the fuck out. Yeah.
And as someone who's been deeply involved in both Chinese music and media, for some of the bands that you work with at your label, do you see yourself in the position of giving some of this advice or helping?
Oh, come on. If you give a teenager advice, who fucking takes it? I'm 40. If I say whatever I say, they will transpose that to that like you're against me. So like it's just.
Are they coming to you for any advice though? Or
Oh no. I think.
Are they looking up to you as someone, as a woman,
as a female artist? Yeah. People, when you look up to the people that you're most like. Yeah. So a lot of times you only listen to people. So the artists that I find similar traits or characters or have gone through certain similar things in life that are kind of close to what I do. They're most likely to listen to my advice. But most likely they didn't need my advice in the first place because this is just me confirming what was already going on in their adolescent minds. For older artists, I think after age 30, mature people seek out advice. And then immature people seek out approval. But after age 30, your level of maturity and immaturity doesn't necessarily go up with age. So in the world, I think more secure someone is, the more they seek for approval. And the more secure they are, the more they seek for advice. And a lot of times I don't have that much advice to give to very super secure people because they're already super secure. And in a way, having a conversation with them is less advice as is like an exchange of ideas. And as for insecure people, giving them advice a lot of times is kind of just trying to give them the assurances that they know they need in order for them to walk forward. Not necessarily giving them advice so far as just reaffirming the bits that need to be reaffirmed in their ideas already.
And for some of these bands and some of these pressures, is the music almost a conversation in and of itself, where even if the lyrics may be abstract at times, or it doesn't always come across clearly, do you feel there's a lot of dialogue going on with some of these more niche bands as to some of the issues we've talked about today?
It sounds kind of horrible, but I think most musicians are afraid to think about this, not necessarily about the world, because that's a very, very harsh mirror to turn on yourself. And I think I would not be in this position to talk about these things if I didn't have all of these other things going on in my life that gave me a certain level of detachment. So in a way, I mean, it's basically putting yourself on an emotional precipice and looking down into the deep, you know. This conversation, at the end of the conversation, there's a very good chance that the only answer for you is to jump. And that's a very difficult place to stand at, especially if this is the only thing that you've known all your life. So I don't want to get into necessarily that, you know, like I don't think most people, I think that's also one of the reasons why I think there's such a high rate of depression in musicians. People say it's because musicians are sensitive people. I've dealt with musicians and all sorts of different artists all my life. You know, like anybody who chooses to do anything creative is generally like sensitive, because you know, insensitive people, they don't necessarily decide to go into